Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session on online trials and tribulations uh, about the online classrooms that we are having for past 6 months. With me, I have a very elite panel today. We have Mr. Rajendra S Pawar, the founder and chairman of NIIT, and Professor Harish Choudhary from IIT Delhi. I would request both of them to switch on their videos and audios as well, so that I can have the pleasure of introducing them. Let me tell you something about Mr. Pawar first. Mr. Rajendra S. Pawar is the Vice President, Board of Governors of the Scindia School. He was felicitated with the Lifetime Achievement Award at DataQuest ICT Awards 2019 on 18th August 2020. He completed his schooling from the Scindia School in 1967 and received Madhav Award in 1999. Graduated from IIT Delhi in 1972 and then once again received Distinguished Alumnus Award in 1995 and went on to co-found NIIT Limited that revolutionized the IT training industry in India. For his contribution, he was awarded the prestigious Padma Bhushan in 2011. He was conferred Master Entrepreneur of the Year Award 1999 by Ernst& Young. And currently, he is the chairman of NASSCOM Cyber Security Task Force and of the Board of Directors of Data Security Council of India. A member of the Board of Governors of Indian School of Business, he has served on the boards of IIT Delhi, IIM Bangalore, IIM Udaipur, amongst others. Having created the IT training industry, he is now involved in establishing an innovative model in higher education, the not-for-profit NIIT University. Such a distinguished career that I have lumps in my throat while I was talking about it. Along with him, completing the panel is Professor Harish Choudhary, a BTech from IIT Kanpur, MBA from IIM Bangalore, and a PhD from IIT Delhi. He is known to most of us as the pioneer of value education in the K-12 sector. So today we are going to have 60 minutes of session where we are going to have a discussion on how these 6 months of online session have bode for us. And if possible, we'll be taking some questions, some of which have been collected beforehand, and some, if possible, taken from the participants during the course. So with this, now I would pass on the dais to Professor Choudhary. Sir, over to you now.
Sorry, I was just passing on a small message to Himanshu. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And this really is a session where I requested Mr. Pawar to share his views because he is the person who has lived with education, technology, and entrepreneurship for, if not more, the last 4 decades. And therefore, when we got talking, I asked him a set of questions, and then we said we need to probably discuss it a little more and share it with the school leaders. You are the people to whom the country looks forward to, and sorry, I'm just taking another minute or so. Himanshu, he is still unmuted. He's sending a message that he's unmuted and he can't unmute himself. It is saying the host is to unmute you. Just check. So I had an occasion to work with Mr. Pawar under his stewardship, under his chairmanship, though officially I was reporting to Vijay Thadani at that point of time. We called him VKT, and I remember 35, 36 years back at NIIT, we were experimenting with CBTs, computer-based training packages. I think we have come a long way from there. And I wanted him to share with you his rich experiences of the very caption that NIIT at that time brought in as a logo, bringing people and computers together. I remember so much of the work that we did on that. So without taking much time, our conversation started with an article that Mr. Pawar had written in June. And when I looked at it, I said, this needs a discussion. So, sir, I'm going to request you to comment on where we were in June and where we are today, where you had said that board students exhausted teachers. Could you please elaborate on it? Is the situation much the same? Has it worsened? What has been your opinion, understanding of it so far?
So thank you so much, Harish, first of all, and thanks for setting up this session. This whole subject of online classes, I think, is concerning more people. This one subject is concerning more people than most, because everybody has a child or a nephew or a grandchild who's studying and is now stuck at home along with everybody else. And so the concern about whether education is happening or not happening, or happening well or happening better, has been on everybody's mind. But everybody's experience when it started off, end of March in some cases, April in some cases, was quite a shock, if I may say so. And since I'm involved in a few institutions, I am on the board of my own school, alma mater, which is the Scindia School. I've been involved with the whole IT activity, as you would understand, for the last decade and a half. I got a very close view of how this very sudden effect of COVID affected education. Of course, we have a university, and that also we shut down on 12th of March. So all of us were caught unaware that in the month of April, I had the occasion to watch this more closely. And in early March, I got a chance to talk to many other educators. And at that time, it was very, very clear that everybody had been caught completely unawares. And the situation was that everybody was struggling. People were struggling with first getting the infrastructure right, the connectivity right, the devices right. Teachers were caught unawares because most of them, and here, of course, we're touching only of the top 2 or 3% out of our 1.5 million schools and 25 crore students. We're talking a very small section of people that you and I get in touch with. But even there, it was very clear that students were struggling to figure out how to live their life in a classroom through a screen. And teachers were struggling to figure out what's happening in those little stamp-like faces compared to the typical classroom. And teachers, of course, were struggling more because children at least are adept with IT. Few teachers have moved ahead, majority haven't. So the situation was one where there was no engagement between the students and the teachers. And therefore the students were utterly bored, because it's quite a task for teachers to keep students engaged, and here they were being ineffective largely. And on the side of the teachers, they suddenly were overburdened, not just by the challenge of technology, but the challenge of how to teach, but also the challenge of finding suddenly the parents coming in front and saying, is this what you teach in school? Is this what your teacher is like? So suddenly, instead of just 30 or 40 students, they had 30 or 40 parents in addition to the students. So there was a period of about a month and a half when I think the system was in severe stress. And that's what I tried to capture, because everybody was bragging. Every school was bragging that our school is great. Everything's going fine. Every parent was saying, my kid is a genius. He knows how to do computers. But it was evident teaching and learning was not happening. So I thought it's important to confront this reality and bring it to the fore, so that first of all, everybody identifies with the problem. So the purpose of the article essentially was to put a mirror in front of all of us at that point in time for the first about a month and a half, and to say that we had a serious situation here and action had to be taken. And that really was the purpose of writing that article.
Great, sir. I want to share with you a survey we did of about 184 teachers in the last week of July, to be specific, on 28th and 30th of July. And the teachers reported that the quantum of learning in online classes is significantly less than in the regular classrooms. Specifically, the quantity of syllabus covered, transacted, is approximately 70%. Quantity of retention was about 67%. Attendance was about 65%. If we take these together, it implies that the quantum of learning may have dropped to nearly 30 to 35%. What are your views on the same?
I think this is and I think your survey covered quite a large number of schools, if I'm not mistaken, and a large range of schools across the country. So I want to first give a word of caution that you cannot generalize this percentage across the system. And I will, a little later, want to try and segment and talk about what was happening in which kind of schools. But it's fair to say that schools in the first phase, so I'll look at three phases really. There was this phase before schools broke for vacation, when they were in a massive bit of struggle. Then there was a break, and then they came back. And the first phase, which was this whole period where I said that students are bored, they're not getting engaged, and teachers don't know what's hit them. At that time, it was quite common to see teachers saying that my attendance in my class is much lower than what I see in a physical classroom. So your figure of 60% or whatever was valid at that time in many schools. And when we came into the second phase, post-vacation, now I'm finding that the better schools are actually reporting better attendance. So the few schools that I watched closely, they said that we used to have out of 30, 35 students, 2 or 3 absent every day, or maybe 4, not more, in the physical classroom. Now we have situations where virtually nobody is absent because they're stuck at home. And there's a parent stuck at home. So the attendance picture changed dramatically over this, from the first phase and then the vacation and the second phase. But the attentiveness, which was very, very low in the beginning, is coming, but still is a serious issue. The ability to engage students, and for the students to sit in front of a screen, even though schools are having shorter sessions, less sessions, they're doing everything they can, the ability to keep a bright young mind focused on one thing for a period of time, we know the challenges. So the attentiveness continues to be a problem. And we'll talk a bit about the innovation that schools are doing, or teachers are doing, I would say. We are seeing a remarkable span in the extent of innovation of the highly innovative teacher, the average teacher, and the not so innovative teacher. So attentiveness and engagement continues to be a big challenge. And then the third thing you talked about is coverage. I think that still remains an issue. So the fact that CBSE has agreed to reduce the curriculum for the syllabus for exams down by 30% indicate that they also recognize that the quantum of learning is suffering. But remember, even if for class 10 and 12, they cut down the syllabus, there's still a multiplication to be done with attendance, which is getting better for the good schools, at least well-equipped schools with children who are well-equipped, and then the question of attentiveness. So the challenge remains. And I have to say that there are strong views emerging from teacher communities that they, for this reason and many others, they're eagerly looking to get children back. And there are other reasons as well, but this is one of them, that the throughput of learning, which is a multiplier of attendance, which is under control, attentiveness, which is still patchy, and quantum that is learned. Because pedagogies, people haven't been able to respond with pedagogies to cover the same amount of content in the same amount of time. So this challenge still remains. And again, we see some schools which have gone further ahead and some which are falling back. And we'll talk a bit of that when we talk of teachers, perhaps. You're on mute.
I had done that. My apologies. I also want to draw your attention to some comments we got from the parents and also the teachers when they talk to the parents, and they're reporting that some parents are finding it difficult to manage their child's learning, as many of them are uncomfortable with the technology. Some lack the technology infrastructure. And then there are families, nuclear families with both parents working, there are families who have one device and 2 or 3 children to attend classes. What is it that the school can do to support the parents?
So the first and most important statement I want to make is that schools have suddenly got the parent into the pedagogical equation. Otherwise, twice in a year or once in a year, there would be a PTM where you have many teachers in a room, 2 parents in front of a teacher for a few minutes, and there was really no engagement. I think what COVID has done, it has brought all 3 into the equation. Now, a few parents in a few schools remain quite engaged, but a vast majority of parents, particularly with now both parents working, look for intervening only at few intervals. And from there, they've come to a situation where they're in it. So the first and most important message I'd like to give is the schools now have to take the responsibility, which probably they've started taking now because of the pressure. They first have to teach the parent, not the subject, not the exam. They have to teach the parent of how this new format will work. So they obviously don't need too much digital literacy. The kids do it for them. They only have to understand the tricks that the kids may do in terms of putting, reconnecting and such little tricks which they do all the time to show that they are not there. But beyond that, I think they have to do the following. And I think they're doing it, but schools have to take this ownership. The parents' role in getting them to know that these are the sessions. This is the prior work a child has to do. So the flipped learning, which many schools are doing, where they want children to do a little bit of work before, which is a very good idea, because their children are learning something at their own pace. Some do it fast, some do it slow, but they come having done some work together. So getting this prior work done, making sure they're undisturbed during the session, and making sure, so therefore there's discipline, there's prior preparation, and of course then looking after them, because the rest of the day there are too many people in the home at times, so giving them the mental space. So as I said, schools do it, good schools do it more, but now every school has to make sure that they are training the parents on their role in this equation. I think that's a minimum requirement. But what we are noticing when we look at the best practices, and there are so many good examples, and some people are saying that we have now pedagogical parents. That's a term I'm hearing a lot, which basically means they're co-teachers. So now, particularly in the younger ages, the parents have a bigger role, because keeping a young child watching the screen, if it's a game, it's fine. But if it's teaching, unless the teacher is doing a lot of song and dance, which the young primary teachers do as well, they have to be keeping the child focused. And the moment kids become teenagers, they want to elbow out the parents in any case. So at that time, they just have to make sure they've done the preparation, they're sitting in a place, and ideally the screen is facing a place where others can also see that there are split screens not going on. So there's a certain amount of things that parents have to learn, and they're learning. And I think teachers are finding a terrific contribution from many. And I'm also noticing that now the school is engaged with the parent at a much higher frequency, because parents also can give more times, even if they're working from home. So I think the engagement of the parent, teacher in the school has suddenly gone up, and better schools have better engagement. So to the extent that parents can take care of the mechanical aspects of making sure the attention, parents can also get feedback. And teachers, I noticed, are now calling up parents and saying, this happened, that happened, and the other. And so I think the triad is at work, I think. And the schools, better schools are realizing they have that resource. And parents are realizing they have a better fix of what happens in the classroom. So, but parents are on a learning curve. So school has to take the responsibility to teach their parents, and it'll give them rich dividends, as we are finding in many cases.
So as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. I think this is a very useful partnership. And if harnessed, it can give good results. And also, maybe the onus of classroom management now shifts to the parents. Great, sir. Our survey also suggests that some teachers are uncomfortable with technology and or lack the infrastructure resources for online classes. How can the school support these teachers? What have been some of the good examples of the schools that have supported the teachers?
So again, I think the audience we have today, I notice, is largely from schools which are reasonably well endowed. The parents are reasonably well endowed. But I think the biggest challenge for the country is out of the 25 crore students, I would think it's a small single digit percentage that we are. The problem at the national level is an unbelievably difficult problem. So I remember when I was speaking to principals, the Sahodey group, very bright set of school principals that I spoke to in Delhi, and they were already kind of coping with the problem well. We were talking about this issue of digital divide because the economically weaker sections are represented in the schools we talk about. And I think in these good schools, they manage to find ways to help those children to get a device at home, whether it's a tablet or many just use the smartphone. But I shudder to think of what's happening to the vast overriding majority. So we will not go there because this is not the subject here. But that problem is a largely unsolvable one. But in that discussion, the point I was making is most of these principals were looking at probably a July opening. Maybe in July we'll open. So they were thinking we somehow have to go through this period, cover whatever we can. And many of them, I remember telling me that we may just have to start all over again because the last 10% of the class is falling further back than they did in the classroom. So if they have to come back into the same classroom, we can't start from the point where we finished. So those were the conversations. But then we started discovering that's not going to happen. So the teachers in the first phase, as I said, the pre-vacation phase, were flummoxed. And it was the leadership, the difference I saw was the schools where the leadership recognized this problem and rolled up their sleeves to say, how do we give every teacher the equipment they need? Do they have a headset? Do they have a good device? Do they have a good connection? Schools had to reach out to teachers first because if they couldn't reach there, they couldn't reach the students under any circumstance. And so that was the first thing that schools had to do, and many of them did very well. And the very well endowed ones, frankly, they were already very well equipped. Most children had devices, most teachers in school had devices, but many at school also, at home also had. So, but they were still on a pedagogical journey which was completely new. Even where schools were using digital classrooms and everything else, they were ahead. And this is now where I want to bring a very interesting analogy because I've been thinking about why are some ahead, why are some so far behind, and the analogies of how we learn how to ride a bicycle. And I'm sure everybody on this talk, barring a few who finally gave up, have been through that experience, which is that you're given a bicycle and quite often it's your dad or it's your elder siblings and they come with you and they make you sit on it. You may get a smaller one, which means your legs can possibly reach, or you get a taller one, but they hold the seat and the handle and they run with it and then they tell you, okay, now manage the handle. I'm going to leave the handle. I'll just hold the seat so that even if you wobble, I'll keep you straight. And this process goes on. And then the person who's supporting finds that this person is getting a balance and leaves it for a while, but runs along. And when the wobbling starts, hold the person, drops them, stops them from dropping. And you do that till such time the person is getting a comfort to go maybe 20 feet on their own and fall down, which they will. Now, I will say, and this is my real revelation, which doesn't surprise me, it disappoints me a little because we've been pushing schools to get every teacher equipped. And there has been a huge resistance because the changeover process is like the bicycle process. You're flipping and trolling. And the teacher says, you want me to do this or you want me to complete the course because exam is coming. So many schools who have been using technology were still, the teacher was like the person sitting where once in a while the parent leaves the bicycle, but the IT guy is around to make sure I don't drop. These schools have had a very steep learning curve going up and they've moved up. So between the pre-vacation time and the post-vacation time, we see a dramatic difference. So the earlier period of frustrated and exhausted teachers, where the parental role got defined and accomplished and they became supporters, and the technology was absorbed. And in the vacation time, most of these schools really did a tough job of teaching teachers. I know principals and vice principals sitting and auditing everybody's class once, twice, three times, like the parent trying to teach, and then HOD sitting and so on. But the teacher who hadn't sat on the bicycle and the schools which hadn't got their teachers on the bicycle have not been able to ride the bicycle. This is a new divide. Fortunately, not a long divide. At least during vacation time, most schools got it, most teachers got it, and they started the struggle. And now we find that the difference, I mean, when post-vacation, the difference between those who knew how to bicycle and those who didn't was stark, like it's 0 and 1. But now people are struggling, but still, and I'm not counting of the 95% of schools who don't have infrastructure, I'm talking of the 5% endowed schools. There is still a challenge, and I think this analogy, every time I now test it on people and they seem to feel it's right. So in every school there were some teachers, but only thing now in this vacation time, other teachers are holding the bicycle for the teachers who couldn't. So there's a whole lot of work going on to get the teacher onto the path, but teachers now struggle with newer things, or not newer things. So they've figured out how to use the parent and interact with the parent to some extent. And I would say to a good extent. And attendance therefore is reaching 100%, as I mentioned. They've figured out that prior preparation has to be done. They've also figured out that the child doesn't do very obvious kind of naughty stuff, but teachers haven't quite figured out what's going on the other side. Okay, and we have to accept that kids will always be smarter, and they will keep learning new tricks. But now I know many teachers who found the counter tricks to figure out. And one very interesting one was, and it was a kind of a meme, but it brought the message that the teacher talking to 3 kids as an example, and they've suddenly stopped their video and said, "Man, the signal is very bad." And then the ma'am figures they're up to this trick. So she says, "Okay, children, signal is bad. Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, I'll take the class." And all the signals came back immediately. So I think there is this learning taking place, and this will happen because children will be children. Every teacher knows that. Hundreds of years of school have taught the schooling system how to deal with their tricks. And so this is a steep learning curve. So teachers still struggle with this. But frankly, I think this one thing this phenomena is doing to children is making them more independent. It is making them independent learners. It is making them more disciplined. And being under parental supervision, the discipline of one child at a time compared to 30 or 40 or 20 in a class is easier. And they are somewhat becoming independent learners because they have prior preparation. And the way the teacher gives them preparation to do, if it's just to read or go to this site or look at this content or do whatever, is getting them to do more work independently. So the new pedagogies is where the teachers are on a very steep learning curve. And so the struggle continues. We should not expect that to change overnight. But since we are not sure when schools will open, now they were saying some can open in September, and now they're saying not September. Some people are saying it may not be till December. Nobody knows. So I guess it's best for every principal on this call and every teacher to recognize that you better, get your act together, because not that this will be the way of life, but to make sure that children don't lose out too much, because you do have to catch up. And in June, teachers were saying, well, we have the winter vacation. We'll open before that. We'll have a short vacation. Then we have next summer vacation for many kids, barring the 12th class. Now, those opportunities are going away. So it's a here and now problem. And therefore, I think teachers have to recognize they're on a steep learning curve. School managements have to thoroughly invest in coaching one teacher at a time on the bicycle trip. And of course, they're becoming adept as well. Teachers have become very adept. So there I would say that teachers should form their own consortia. Schools are forming consortia like this. Many groups exist. So teachers trying to figure out how to use any piece of software. You can get out a WhatsApp group, form a WhatsApp group, you get 20 people there. You can build your virtual groups without really depending on only your school. and you can find out many places. So again, you're on a learning curve. So many opportunities, but the schools should get together in a community. It doesn't have to be physically the same place, but physically will be good, because even when you come back, you'll have notes to compare. So better to be in a physical community, though you're dealing virtually. Compare notes, look at best practices. This is a really, really challenging time for teachers, and but it's a fantastic time to grow. It's a fantastic time to grow, and I'm finding remarkable examples.
Mr. Pawar, we have a large number of questions which had come into us earlier, and there are some raised hands. We are halfway through the session. We've done about 30 minutes. So I'm going to quickly raise another 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah,
and then we'll get on to the
keep the answers short. Yeah. Okay. We do want to hear people's questions. Yes.
Yes. Many teachers are feeling stressed with increased workloads. And also, they're very concerned, a large number of questions coming in on the efficacy of online assessments. Could you...
So there are 2 issues here, I think, 2 important issues. Let me just say that among schools and teachers who are up on the learning curve, they're learning how to adapt. And I've been asking them that if it takes you, if you were doing 10 days of teaching in the normal classroom, how many days will it take in the online classroom? And when we started, they said, I will need more than double. They're still saying they may need 20-30% more. So this question is not a solved question, because the pedagogy is required to learn with the same amount within the same time is limited. So there is a bit of a stretch, and teachers are now actually engaging with students. They're calling them, they're calling parents, so the days become longer. But some teachers I find are effectively the number of hours I put in, if I counted from the time I got into the bus and got back to the home, those number of hours, now I'm starting late in the morning, so I can do some preparation. I will get a break after lunch, and then I get on to supporting. So many of them have found a sweet spot to do the same number, roughly the same number of hours, not all. But after doing a lot of thinking and planning and reorganizing, so it's not only about pedagogy, it's also about discipline. It's also about, so here's one thought, that teachers have now found ways by breaking students into many groups, which many of the tools can do, to give them activities. And the activity is not like getting them off your head, you're giving them things to think about and come back together. So collaboration, which was happening in a class in real time, we are making it happen in even a smaller group. So the activities, if they're directed well, is giving time to speed up the learning process. But let's accept it. I think I would just urge every teacher, all of us have moments in life when we have to rise to the occasion, and the many are, that till December, January, February, just be prepared for more hours. There's no alternative, and I know all of you. I mean, I have to say this for teachers. They continue to be the most idealistic people on earth, because they work with young children who are, pure. And so they work from the heart much more, and they're rising to the occasion. So this will be a burden to carry for many more months. And then about evaluation. I think evaluation is actually the bigger unsolved issue. Some people are beginning to use now some tools which give analytics. You can, so their assessment of tools is there, but the thing still comes to setting questions yourself. I wouldn't really like teachers to get banks of questions for help. So construct your questions, put them in the tools that you use, and a lot of the assessment, a lot of the analysis, a lot of the rating, or who's the one who's lagging, who to give remedial to, those things can be done by these tools quite well. And in some subjects, and sometimes you can get these work groups to say, okay, 5 of you give a test and compare notes with each other. I think many of these things are done. But there are many innovations possible in the interim assessments to see whether learning is happening or not. I think the obsession should be with that, not whether exam is happening or not. So learning outcomes is the question. And posing questions, posing them differently, putting them into the exercise, getting them out into work groups. Many of these things are being attempted, and there are some tools which at least give you some templates. So there is a lot, and this is one of the tough ones. The outcome is a tough one. I would say that there is a serious issue for class 10 and 12. For the others, let's give ourselves some freedom. Let's not get obsessed about marks alone. Let's focus on whether they're learning and look at new pedagogies. I personally feel there's never been a better time for a teacher to experiment, because nobody is watching. Nobody can watch. Okay, so do the experiment that you've always wanted to do, but you were not allowed.
There's a very interesting comment coming in on your previous question from Mrs. Rita Call, Director Millennium. And I'm fascinated to read it. I'm just reading it from the chat box. The students are conducting seminars and special assemblies for the parents too. And the principals.
Great. I know that she's a very innovative principal, very unconventional. I've met with you, Rita, often. So I do expect many such things from you. And I also hope that, like this, principals and teachers such as you are doing such discussions to share your experiences, because these best practices are very doable. And I talked about children taking responsibility. You've just given an excellent example. And you're also building a capability in the child, which you can't teach in a classroom. So you're delegating tasks which you are identifying. Then everybody shouldn't be in the teacher's plate. A lot should go to the parents' plate, a lot should go to the students' plate. And a lot, of course, the residue comes onto the principals and headmasters' place. So these are good ideas, and I think these are methods. And I'm sure there are hundreds of such practices.
So we are all feeling this change and maybe uncomfortable and a little different, the new normal, abnormal. Dr. Radhakrishnan, in his introductory essay to the Bhagavad Gita, says that crises bring out the best in men. Now, with the crisis caused by this COVID, do you see the positives, any positives coming out of this? You mentioned some, but we probably need to systematize and put them into a process and institutionalize them.
So let me say the following. First of all, I think nobody can ignore the devastating effect of the COVID. I mean, it's unbelievable in every sphere of life. So I'll set that aside for a minute and just focus on what we are talking about. And to me, actually, it is an opportunity of a lifetime for everybody and anybody. Because let me put it this way, for educators, we will never have a controlled experiment of this scale. At our university, Nimrana, the NIIT University, the Center for Education Technology, is saying that we can never get a controlled experiment of this sort to do whatever experiments we want. So everything we are doing when we are experimenting is, within quotes, new and innovative and therefore research. So in this milieu, by accident, we can't define boundaries. And the good leaders, good school leaders are giving the freedom to the teachers like never before. So all the iron tight frames which existed, regulation puts a lot on the schools, schools put a lot on the HODs put a lot on the teachers, and in the end the teachers very little frame. I would today tell everybody, you got freedom. You got total freedom. And freedom to do what you always wanted to do, freedom to teach how you always wanted to teach, and you can be the innovator and you can share your stuff. So this is the biggest opportunity we have at this time to carry out controlled innovations. I don't want to call them experiments, controlled innovations. And therefore, and like many have said before, that any crisis or a crisis is too good a thing to miss the opportunity within it. So this crisis should be used by everybody to innovate. There's remove all shackles is what I would say. Mute again. Unmute. Yeah.
I just want to draw your attention to the new education policy and the opportunities that it is giving us, offering a stellar role for the empowered teachers. How can we capitalize on it?
So I think, I do hope that all school principals, and I'm sure on this call everybody would have read the sections on school education. I think there are fundamental reforms there, truly fundamental reforms. But if I was to say what are the top few things in the policy, I have listed for myself 4. The first one is flexibility and freedom. I want to capture it in that phrase. Flexibility and freedom. So the policy says we will remove this straitjacketing. of putting people into channels and forcing them down the path they don't want. There is a lot of discussion about curriculum development being rolled out to the front end. In fact, I have argued that the teacher and her students should be formulating curriculum. It should come to that end rather than coming top down. So barring the board exams, which have to do some standardization, for which we have to align, I think the freedom and flexibility is going to be important, and therefore policy is supporting freedom and flexibility, number one. Number two, policy is supporting multidisciplinarity, holistic learning, and so on. And the good schools do a lot of that. I know many schools are doing art, music, PT, yoga, so many things. In fact, yoga, what they say is the parents are also joining it. So there's a collaborative effort going on. So multidisciplinarity is being talked of, and therefore school is not just about exam. During this period, in any case, we're all giving up on exam, barring the board people. So let's stretch the boundaries and look at holistic learning. Third is technology. It talks a lot about the role of technology. And as I'm saying, we have no choice to learn, but to learn. We have no choice. And the fourth is about research. And I believe that research is a state of mind. It's not about a lab. It's not $1 billion lab. So when we teachers say you be curious, they're saying do research. They're saying don't ask for answers, look for new questions. That is research. But I think there is something more. We're talking of holistic, and we're talking of building sensitive, talks about building children who know their responsibilities and children who promote democratic principles, for example. So here's an experiment I would like to give to every teacher and school principal to do. So what we are saying is, right now we are saying that we are moving from the classroom being a place where a child remembers and goes back, to now a place where a child can think and feel. So that's what the policy is, thinking and feeling. Okay. Thinking is about all the stuff we do on technology, learning, curriculum, experimentation. Here's a project for feel. The child is at home with the parent. Every family is aware of 2, 3, 4 people who are supporting them as workforce, either in the house or coming to the home, or the security guard or someone. Make it every child's project that they have to understand what is COVID doing to that person. They will be shocked and pained and troubled. And the project should be what we do as a class, group of class in a social group to help these people. It's a project which I'm suggesting every school gives to every child. Because we want them to build empathy, it can't be taught in a classroom, so we don't teach it. If you want to teach ownership and responsibility, very tough. We incentivize kids with stars and marks, which is Pavlovian, right? We don't make them independent. Now they have independence. They're taking ownership. Open this part of their heart and give them a project. And I think the policy talks of that as well. Now, again, I want to point to 2 people's work, which I follow closely, and some people on the call may know them. And they're doing path-breaking work. One is a guy called Dr. Sugata Mitra. He was with NIIT, he's an IIT Delhi researcher. And then he did the famous hole-in-the-wall experiment in 1999, which was unsupervised learning when the internet had just come. What if there are no teachers, was the question he was trying to pose. And he did brilliant work and then went on to UK to do more work. And he's created the idea of the self-organized learning environment, where children co-teach. Now, we do know the role of collaboration, but this is pushing the boundary. And he got a TED Prize for that work in 2013, got $1 million or so. And he's setting up these souls, and now he's got huge popularity the world over. To me, this is a period for the soul. And I know that on 27th of September, he has a talk. I think it'll be on YouTube and so on as well. And Harish, you could help all our participants if you want to participate. He has very radical views, outlandish views, even on evaluation. So it will open the minds of many teachers on this problem. And he has many outlandish and proper views of why are we teaching and what are we teaching. So that's one person I recommend they follow, Sugata S. And second is someone in Delhi, many people know in the public school system, that is Arun Kapoor, who was at Vasant Valley School, and now for many years he's in Bhutan. And he's building a school that all of us should try and watch out for, the Royal Academy for the King of Bhutan. And he's written his book, the third book. It's called Serene Strength. Serene Strength. And interestingly, the book will be launched next month. I'll be with him in that conversation, which we'll probably do virtually. And I'm interested to see, and I'm giving a peek review, that the biggest chapter, interestingly, is on technology. The biggest chapter. But that's not the most important thing. He's talking about the purpose of learning. So I think in this time, what COVID has done, it's just broken all the shackles. We can rethink education. All of us have been saying it. You can read from Edison's time what he talked, and from everybody's time, that if all the great people have talked about how education is too rigid a frame. I think that till COVID gets over, the frames are not there. And people like this are showing us the way. And I would strongly recommend that people look at this as well. And finally, so this is what I thought I should suggest. That people look at these radical ideas.
I want to draw you into, if I may say, your love. NIIT has been the fountainhead of IT revolution of India, and India has leaped many steps in the global economy by virtue of the computer literacy that NIIT heralded. Do you see some similar role that the private schools of India can do to revolutionize the education sector?
So let's see what the parallel is. So 81 when we started. No, I'll tell you. 81 when we started, nobody knew IT. We were on nobody's radar. Nobody was regulating us. We did what we wanted. We had all the freedom. The analogy is private schools have a lot of experience. They are at scale. I think 4 lakhs out of 15 lakhs are private schools. Assume for the next few months you have no shackles and redo what we did. No shackle, just go ahead. There is a board exam of 10th and 12th. You've got to do that because kids have to figure out where they stand and prepare for the world. And that's not going to change overnight. But barring that, I would say just rebel. Fully rebel. We did that. We managed to build a momentum of rebellion. We could establish that we were doing something good because we had the freedom. So good schools are doing it, but they couldn't establish because it was too constrained. Now, if 1,000 good schools set good examples, then they will be setting examples for the remaining 11 lakh schools out of 15, which are government schools, to follow those steps. So that would be my suggestion. Just liberate yourself.
Wonderful. The last question from my side, and then I'll take up the participant questions. When I look at the developed countries, Finland, Australia, US, I find a close relationship that the school education system has with the higher education system, which is something I find not adequately done in India. In your opinion, how can the higher education system support the school education system?
So I think it's not as much about higher education system supporting school system. I think the break between the school system and the college system is universal, first of all. Some countries are doing a little better, but let's accept one brutal, harmful reality. That a child is in school, coming into class 8, 9, 10, coming towards 11, 12, doesn't know where they will go, barring the fact that in class 9 or 10, they are put into one track. After that, they don't know what studies they will do, and then they don't know which college they will get. And it's an absolute concrete wall. There's no visibility of where they go. And then there's these massive exams where only 2% are selected or whatever, and then they're shed to some place. You take this city or that city and that subject or this subject. Nothing to do with the child's desire, aspirations, and dreams. Now look at the university side. Our university, NIIT University, 10 years old now. And in year 5 or 6, I said, this is a real problem. And Rita will remember, she's been involved in those conversations. So we said, let's think of building a bridge. Because the university doesn't know who's going to show up. Equally blind. It's ridiculous. So the thing is not that university has to do, I think there has to be a bridge. Let me just use that term. And this will have to be institutionalized, but as a university, we're trying to be a role model, trying to do innovation. We said, okay, we will look at 50 schools or 60 schools because our intake is small. And we want to build the bridges. We want our faculty to be able to go in and talk to teachers and students right from class 8 maybe or 9. We want the children to come for camps in the summers and winters. We want their teachers to come here. And by the way, COVID will accelerate that process, at least I know. It will be, now exchange will be virtual and visible and very much larger numbers. And the idea should be that the child should be able to start going on a bridge which can then stream out into multiple paths, build a few options, then pick the option, which is it's a mutual discovery process. Good teachers, good students will look back at the Guru Shishya Parampara. The thought was that the teacher, will show up. Remember, the teacher can't find it shows up. Now, this show up question is done. By the way, I've seen teachers. I was on a flight once and going from Bombay to Nagpur, where a professor from US said, there's a place called Raipur. There's a youngster who's doing a PhD. I want to take him to my university. He's just too brilliant for where he is. Or I think building those bridges is workable, and frankly, with technology, it'll be even more workable. So it's, at least I'm trying to make sure that we work on these bridges. It's difficult, but we have to make it happen. Schools have to recognize that they should also build a path for their students. And so we've set up the Center for Education and Technology. As I've told you, we've had a few PhDs. I got a few papers written by some of the PhDs who've come out. I don't have time for that. But I do have one thing I want to refer to, is research going on, which every teacher should be concerned about: reading on paper or book and reading on the screen. These two impact the brain very differently. Please read that. So there, the thing we're talking of, the phrase they use is continuous partial attention. Children are becoming victims of continuous partial attention and of what is called the novelty reflex. I'm working on something pops up. I look there. If I have a book, nothing pops out for that time. So, of course, everybody knows that till age 5, keep the screen away from the child. Difficult to do, but keep them away. Bring it very slowly. And even when you bring it, find ways to help teachers to understand. So things like that need to be done. So there's a lot of research to be done. The lab is out there. We are all a laboratory right now. All of us are a lab. And if we don't experiment now, then it'll be a lost opportunity.
I'm going to take up some questions that are about, I just took a quick count, there are about 200 questions with some overlaps, a lot of overlaps. So I'm just going to pick out a few.
Do you want to stretch a little beyond 6?
I was about to ask you that, Mr. Pawar. So can we take it for another 10-15 minutes?
I'm okay. We still have the peak number of participants and many questions. So
yes,
I'd be okay to go on, and people should stay as long as they're comfortable. And then, of course, we'll carry on till 6:15 maybe.
Yes, as a professor, that's the rule I follow, that I'm going to continue. Students can leave whenever they want.
Okay, that's fair.
So the first one I want you to look at is from Mr. Ram Trivedi of Mayo College. And he's saying, sir, do you believe that online classes are beneficial to the students? I think he's hitting at the very, very fundamental, basic issue.
So let me say that if all that you're doing is online classes, you have a problem. You won't get a solution. But if you can figure out which part is online and which part cannot be, and that is what you'll do in this COVID time. Even if you learn that, you would have learned one hell of a lot as a teacher, right? Number one. Number two, what can you do on online more than what you do in a Zoom class? There is a hell of a lot more. So Zoom class is not equal to online. In fact, that article I wrote, I did talk about the fact that that's just about 10% of the game. Okay. So there is many more things you can do with online. And therefore, I think teachers are on a steep learning curve. Those who are experimenting can figure out that you can do very much more. This is a place where technology is behind you, because people are trying to figure out. Every technology guy wants to now come into the classroom space. So they're adapting and changing on the fly, giving you more and more tools and techniques. And the rate of change of new tools coming into your hands is phenomenal. So school leaderships have to manage that. So to answer your question, I'd say I have believed, and we started dabbling with technology in 1981. I started attending the first conferences in the world on technology in classrooms. And I've always believed and still believe that the blended model is key. For very young children, very little online. As they become independent learners, little more online. And I think the phrase I heard from all people here is the psychosocial issues. Children cannot interact. So here's one thing which is happening and will happen. Teacher is talking to student. We are still in that mode even on technology. But students are talking to each other on social. So these two movements are going on. And if you don't recognize, if you don't leverage that movement, you're missing out. So delegate to them. I think we heard the example of saying, what work do you give to students? So we all learn by collaboration in schools, by the way. All education is collaborative learning. And Sugata Mitra's work is on all of you have heard of constructivism, it's collaborative constructivism. That how do you get people to build on top of what they know, keep constructing through collaboration. And online is a fantastic and powerful tool to make that happen. So online, we have been waiting for it to become more important. I am not waiting for it to take over the teacher's role by any stretch of imagination. Any stretch of imagination. Teachers are capable of doing what computers can't do and online can never do. In fact, Sugata Mitra went and met who was in Sri Lanka? Arthur Clarke, I think. Was he there? Yeah. And he was raising this question ages ago when he had done the hole in the wall. And he said that many teachers are saying they'll be replaced by the computer, and his answer was classic. He says, any teacher who thinks will be replaced by a computer should be. So,
Beautiful.
Define your role, understand the role of technology. Good teachers put challenges. So listen to Sugata, I think he'll give you some very good ideas. Put the big questions to them. Then let them collaborate and figure out for themselves, because they can get knowledge faster than you can get. So classroom is not for them to go out having remembered, to think and feel. Those are two things. Change your role in that sense.
So there was a question from Vikesh from Doon International, and I think since you have probably already responded to it, but I'll read out the question if you want to make another comment on it. If everything can be done online, why do we need physical schools?
Everything can't be done online.
So
and you need more and more physical in the early phases. And as a child becomes an independent learner, then you need to put challenges to them. The self-organizing learning thing thinks of big questions. Why is the earth blue? Give it to a group of class 8 students and see what they come up with. Teacher wouldn't have thought of it. Okay. So, therefore, I think the whole point is that the role of technology and the role of the classroom and the role of the physical school. So already I can tell you one of the biggest challenges that very bright school principals who I talk to are saying, now the teachers are getting a sense of two things. One is a bit of boredom because they're missing the students. The students are missing the social interaction. And this screen time superficial, what did I call it, continuous partial attention problem will start taking its toll. So we have to get kids to schools as soon as the parents are willing to sell them. From our university side, I want to say, in India school side, we told parents we're ready. We are wanting to open in October. Fortunately, it's on a Ford. There's 500 kids. We can make it safe. We are ready. 90% of the parents are ready. But we'll wait for the government, because government will give a date, but they'll open it up earlier than school open. Similarly, at a university, we are fully ready. So the physical place is crucial for the overall development of a child. Nothing can replace it.
As a friend of mine put it, computer is a tool, teacher is the magic.
Very much.
And when they come together, magic happens.
Absolutely right, I think.
I have this very dear friend whom I haven't met for quite some time, Dr. Binay Singh. She runs a senior secondary school, but calls it Tiny Tots. And she has a very interesting question. How can we incorporate online learning in our future classes?
So this is what class?
The blended learning.
Is it what classes are? The school has up till 12 or is it?
It's a K-12 school, but she calls it Tiny Tots.
Okay. No, because see, what you have to do in the first 5 years is radically different from how you have to do it in the last 4 years. first of all. Okay, so when they've gone into senior school and they are teenagers and they are troublemakers and they want to be independent, they're getting a self and an identity and they want to establish, and they're, with peers, there's a kind of dynamic going on, which is an important part of teaching, versus little children who are at a very different cognitive stage. And again, the policy document, I think, articulates some of these things extremely well. So it's not a one size fits all, and I'm sure everybody on this discussion recognizes. So I think when we start looking at what should each school do and what should each teacher do or each level of school do, and what is the role, I think we have to now segment this a little more, because earlier there could be more similarity in how we teach across the classes than what we need to do now. So there has to be a difference. And therefore, school leaders have to start thinking differently. And the role of technology is very different. It has to be far more immersive. So for example, I was talking to a chemistry teacher. She said that now the kids are doing virtual labs on chemistry and blowing up test tubes and all that, and I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me, because I can't let them do them in the lab so they don't finish the experiment. So I think many things can be done. We just need to become aware and we can find them out quite easily.
And there's a related question which probably takes off from here, which Reena Bana from LGS Dehradun is asking. Have you been able to make the online classes effective to the maximum level, or is there scope for further improvement?
So in some of the cases I'm tracking, as I said, attendance was the first thing to come up to speed. Attentiveness continues to be a challenge, but wherever teachers are engaged, finding ways to engage. So there are technical terms for it. There's active learning. There are very many things, but basically they have to be thinking all the time, not just receiving. So your pedagogy has to change. You're continuously putting challenges, breaking them into small groups, but then you don't have time to do that with a full curriculum. So you have to get the right balance. So what really I would say is that it's important to recognize that you can go even beyond what we achieve in 100 hours of classroom. It's possible. So the question of learner motivation remains key. We remember the story that 5% of the kids in a class would be in the library and they'll get their marks. The last 10%, you have to keep putting effort, and the bulk in the middle, we've designed a school system for them, right? The online may give you maybe the top 15, 20, 25% who may go much ahead, further ahead. It may give you a method to really focus and make sure the tail doesn't become long and that the average can do more. So we have to look at pedagogies, segmenting our students, looking at remedial learning for those who are weak, giving freedom to those who are not weak. So net to say that we have a lot to learn, and I'm quite certain that schools which are on a good path, when I talk to them in December, many will be able to say they can cover 10 days stuff in 7 days. So it'll be possible. It is possible.
Yes, and we always believe that improvement is always possible.
Absolutely. There's a lot of headroom because it's early time. Yeah. The innovations from teachers is still to happen, bulk of it.
Hemant Choudhary from the Doon School has a question. Please suggest how to ascertain if learning is happening the way we wish. You have already touched upon it.
This is the toughest question.
And also he has one more question, I'll put it together. What are the best practices to maintain work-life balance during these times?
So I did give an example of a very bright teacher here in Delhi. I was having a conversation with her the day before. So I asked her, tell me truthfully. I mean, you were doing so many hours earlier. Are you doing 5 hours more, 4 hours more? She says, I was doing almost 10 hours more or whatever in the beginning, but now I've been able to bring it to the same number of hours. I've had to juggle my day. But if I count the hours from going to school and coming back, I brought it within that, but I need to do more to help out the weaker kids and to talk to parents and so on. So work-life balance is, once again, break the rule, right? You never taught like this before. You were never sitting in a room, and teachers are never captives in their own homes, right? So the assumptions are all changed. If they are changed, your work-life balance has to change. But I would like to say that if for 6-8 months you have to think, and I'm just borrowing this from a dialogue I heard once, one of our IT industry CEOs, he was asked this question: how do you deal with work-life balance? He said, for the next 1 year, I figured it out. No life, only work. So there's no problem of work-life balance. So I'm saying these next few months, and I appeal to teachers earlier also, you will have to sacrifice on the life side, because you are learning in selfishness, enlightened self-interest. You are learning. You have to put something into the table. You're not a teacher, you're a learner. In fact, one comment comes from many is, we are actually co-learners now. And I've had many of these in the university where we get old faculty, elderly faculty, and they discover that it's okay to make a mistake in a class. It's okay to not know. He said, all my life I've taught in the best of institutions. My horror was I should never be wrong. And here in NU, teachers, students are saying, it's okay, sir, it's okay. He said, it has taken a ton of weight off my chest that I can be wrong, so now I can experiment. So this is the time where you will be forgiven. As I said, this is a window. Experiment, make mistakes. And that's the second part of the question on work-life balance. The first part is a tough one, is, are kids really learning and what are they learning? And the problem has come because the only way we figured this out was exams. And all of us, without exception, curse exams, right? Whether as a parent,
Absolutely.
as a teacher, or as a student. So barring the 2 board classes where you still have to get to perform to a normalization process, I'm posing the question, why exams? So listen to Sugata. He will suggest anyway. What I'm saying is, what if we only focused on in every class or after a few classes, getting students to do a self-assessment. So one thing I found very interesting as feedback, as talking to teachers, large number of teachers night before last, or last night, from my school. I said, give me the unexpected experiences. And one very good one that I want to talk about. They said, the typical dynamic in a classroom where a shy child doesn't ask a question because the others start giggling doesn't happen. The kids haven't yet, they're learning how to do it. They're now doing social media. He said the shy child is coming forward because they are seeing me and nobody else, really speaking. He said, we are seeing a very, very interesting improvement. And they all agreed with that. So I don't know whether that's everybody's experience. So I think if we can just get focused as teachers and get exams out of the process and say, okay, what are the other ways to figure out whether kids are learning or not, which kids themselves can. And I remember when I was in class 8 in my school, we had one of those teachers who come from on deputation or from abroad. He was from Texas, physics teacher. And he came there, when we did the answers, he just gave each other's answer sheets to all of us and said, you mark your neighbors. So we gave everybody 10 out of 10. Everybody got 100 once or twice or thrice, till we figured out that the game was too tough. It was getting a little painful. And after a few cycles, we started looking at somebody's answer to evaluate it. It took some time. He was walking around in the classroom. But we got that sense of responsibility when we were given the freedom. And we started actually becoming quite good at trying to understand what the guy had done. And then he would say, okay, you exchange or talk to each other. That's collaborative constructivism as well. So if you want to see whether kids are learning, don't only see it as your burden. Let the child figure out are they learning or not and give feedback. Let the child talk to the parent. Let the child talk to other children. Just like Rita says, go talk to parent, teach the child. Let children do some more work. After all, they are the beneficiaries. So be radical, what I would say.
My experience is not really with school teaching. And I'm fond of saying that in many forums, I'm the only person who hasn't taught in a school. And so can the analogies of the higher education system really apply here? But there's this wonderful professor at Berkeley who returns all the assignments to his research scholars with the comment, improve upon it, and asks them to submit both. And then he says, what is the extent of improvement you've done in your second draft? So wonderful. I'm just saying that to another question which is coming in from Ananya Roy of the Mothers International School. How is it possible to check 25 to 30 pages for 100 students in a PDF file, which takes a lot of space and time to open?
It's not
So
possible.
I think these are
Let's
someone has
just
to
first
work out
accept
these
what is not
strategies.
possible. So try and see, how do you want to do it differently? Maybe you give it to each other, try it once. Just check how the others do it, or give it back and say, do it again. You talked of another method. So I'm saying we are in the school and college system, which is over-regulated and over-managed and over-controlled. We as teachers hesitate to try out new things. And I would encourage principals to let teachers do what they want, and for teachers to do what they want to do, and engage students in this process. You gave a tip that give it back to the students and say, or interchange it. You can do both. You can do both things. And you may think of other methods. You may just give one question to one and two questions to the other, and have then a conversation around the question. You could do that as well. It will say there were 10 questions. I've given 3 students each question 1 and 2 and 3. And now 3 of you compare your notes. And I'm going to ask 3 of you to come and speak. What's the answer?
I think sometimes we are getting caught up between assessment and evaluation, and assessment of learning and assessment for learning. I think we need to distinguish between them. And maybe, as you pointed out, we focus more on assessment for learning, and evaluation can wait. We don't have to necessarily say this was the best child and this got so many marks. There's a very interesting question.
Sorry, go ahead.
And there's a very interesting question coming from Sharmila Mukherjee from Kerala Public School. How safe is it for the teachers? Isn't their privacy being compromised with parents in the classroom?
So one of the earliest things which came on WhatsApp, and not one but many came, was about this dilemma.
Yes.
And then there was one which was given by an interesting doctor. He was in a doctor dress and he's on the video. And he's appealing to all parents that for God's sake, let the teachers teach. He says, I am also joining and seeing the harassment they're going through. But I guess to some extent that phase is now changing, because parents' anxiety is yielding now to, okay, something is happening. And teachers and school administrators calling up the parent, everybody has a phone, fortunately. And, now actually a principal can also watch a class, okay? And they notice this kid who's doing something naughty, and they can call up the parent and say, look, so-and-so's teacher, your kid is doing this. So there are ways now to observe. There are ways to observe. My own principal at Scindia School, I told him that, I said, earlier you would walk the corridor and, we have 2 floors of classes. And I said, without going in, you could make out from outside how this class is going. He said, yes, I can. I said, what's your equivalent today? Now he's trying to figure out, actually, he can find out much better than he could, because earlier if you opened the class, everything stopped. Now he can watch. And then he can tell a parent that, look, this child for the 3rd time I'm noticing. So the triad is at work. Okay, so I think teachers' concern is very genuine. But I think teachers are learning, parents are learning. The younger children will still need support. Parents will have to be there. And it will be stressful for teachers, as I said, so in the work-life balance. Year 2020, you dedicated to work, let us put it this way. And you had to do more and learn more in the process.
It's been a wonderful session. There's a very personal question, and I'll leave it to you how you want to respond to it, from Yash Nivetia of Scindia School. And he's saying, who is or was your inspiration that helped you to stand in this position?
Well, for the last many years, it's my wife. Okay. So this question, I think, is asked to all of us, who's a role model? And I just concluded that there are far too many role models. So I remember first time I was asked about being on time. And I said I learned it from the person in my hostel in the Scindia school. Every day he had to ring the bell at 6 o'clock. And 6 o'clock, and he used to sing a song along with the bell. And he didn't have a watch, but you could time your watch when the bell rang. And I used to say, if this guy can do it, why can't I do it? I have no reason not to do it. So, to me, I think learning is a personal objective. Curiosity is a personal agenda. So when you are learning, then you look around for who can teach you what. You have to watch. We had gone on a vacation to Latin America, and we went to the forest area, and there a guide in the night took us, and he put a torch on the ants which were walking. He says, I'm going to show you these ants at work. And we saw these ants walking, and going into the hole. And then we saw one ant, 4 or 5 ants with a little leaf. And on top of that was a little ant. And he said, this is the quality control ant. He will see, and he'll give a message to the other guys to eject. So he says, learn diligence from the ant. So curiosity gets you to search for role models. And now I'm going to make an admission, which I made to you. I've learned how to force curiosity on myself. So you talked about, can you talk about online classes? I'm not a great person, but I said yes without thinking. That started my intense search to talk to many people, and I've spoken to many people. I've read a hell of a lot, not that it makes me an expert. So to answer the question, I would say that if you have only one role model, you are missing out a lot in life. At different points, you have different questions. And different people in your life become your purpose for inspiring. You want to live up to the expectation of your friends, your children, and your colleagues, peers. And every now and then I keenly look for what's special about this person. And I find that every person has something special. So as Ayn Rand wrote, the Virtues of Selfishness, it is become selfish about curiosity. You have to learn something. And then you don't have to put people on pedestals. You'll find that strange things will teach you, and strange teachers and people will teach you things you want to learn.
At the same time, sir, on a very personal note, I believe I'm blessed. What I am today, and I believe I'm successful, I am because of some outstanding, committed, world-class teachers. I remember my teacher in primary class, Mrs. Khan, my English teacher in class 5, Mrs. Anita Shori, my teachers in school and college, who have shaped my life. I think teachers have a very important role to play as role models. And I think they have their shoulder to build a nation.
Without a question. But make everybody your teacher.
Yes, absolutely. We have pleasantly overshot some time. So may I request you to give some closing remarks, and there are a very large number of questions. We'll try and respond to them on mail or WhatsApp. It's being recorded. And
if you can club them together into 20, 30 questions, I'd be very happy to spend some time with you. And I would like every question to be answered.
There are a number of them on the Q&A also coming in. But I think for the paucity of time now, and some of us need to move on, may I request you to give us the closing remarks and a few tips at end, which we could carry home.
So, I think the bigger thing I want to say is there's an opportunity here because of these two very interesting events. One is planned, which is the national education policy, which talks about freedom, flexibility, research, thinking, seamlessness, holistic, which is pointing us in that direction. Therefore, leading schools should jump and go ahead. Teachers should go and jump and go ahead. And the second is imposed upon us, which is COVID. Huge challenges, but it is providing us the opportunity to think out of the box in every sphere of life. So why not education? So basically, the first thing I want to tell everybody on this call is, you won't get this situation again. And therefore, bring out the best that you wanted to bring out, try out new things, experiment, compare, and so on. So that's the overall message that I want to give, that this time will not come again. And again, I think this is, I'm just repeating what it said, that classroom is not a place where we want kids to come and remember stuff and go back. We want them to think and feel. And try and give them exercises which get them to do both. You are doing a lot to get them to learn, but get them to think. And you're getting them to do some pre-read, you're getting them to do some post-read, you're getting them to collaborate. And feel is about some feel you can't teach in a classroom. You get them to do some projects. And I just gave one example. Every child can be asked to do that. I think the role for schools to teach parents what to do, we've talked about that. But if you haven't done enough, please do that and keep them going, because now they are engaged with you. For the next few months, they are very actively engaged, and the relationship that you build, the bond that you build will make them work, and you have efficient.
Closing the session now, so Himanshu can come in.
Working groups, you have many working groups, you have WhatsApp groups, many things that have been formed. Some of them will vanish after COVID, let me also say, and maybe they should vanish, but some will continue. So keep parents engaged, but don't let them overload your system, like the teacher from Kerala said. Help you, offload some work to them, become partners with them to help if the child has a difficulty. And so engage teachers is the next thing. And parents, and for the parents, have talked about the fact that it's discipline, preparation, focus, and then how do you feel the feeling while you think about thinking. So there's a chance to build a holistic nature child, there's a chance to build a sensitivity, work along with the school to make that happen. As I said, teachers have the biggest learning curve to go on to. And I will just at the outset say that in the work-life balance, you've given a lot always, but I think this is the time where you can get a massive return on your investment of extra time to become an exceptional teacher who can really use technology as a slave. Because I remember, if any teacher who thinks technology may take their job, they will lose their job to the teacher. So learn how to, and it's not too much to do. You have to learn pedagogy. You have to learn about how the child thinks and feels, and how to use data and information and analytics to help you gauge that. So you don't have those 25 pages each multiplied by so much. There are ways to delegate that task, much of the task, and get it done by the others as well. But you have to learn a lot. You have to experiment with pedagogy. By the way, education, and this is not news, people have said this thing so often, is the one field. I had a big discussion once for higher ed people and policymakers, and I titled it, Education, the Last Bastion of Reform. Everywhere else in the world and every part of life there's reform, but education is not reform. It's just too tightly gripped by government, by regulation, by state. It's a concurrent subject. Then by the boards, then by the school management, then by, there are layers and layers. So by the time you come to the teacher, your hands are tied like that. This time you are being given. I'm saying you are being given. So take this opportunity is what I will say to the teachers. And finally, as I said, you have to get onto the bicycle, and then the bicycle will get wings and then make you fly. So that's what I'd like to speak.
Thank you so much. I just want to end with a little quote from a book I was reading from Nietzsche. Anything that does not kill you makes you stronger. I think the teachers have done a wonderful job so far, and will do a wonderful job. With that, we'll close this session today. For many more questions to come, but we'll see them later. And over to you, Himanshu, for a vote of thanks.
So I was listening to this session, being an attendee, and I'm so glad that I was there all the time. Rajendra sir, what you have managed to do is to make us look at this entire COVID thing with a degree of optimism and excitement. And I was actually thinking what new I can do now that I have this controlled set of experiment being run in the entire world. So thank you for changing our outlook. So I think this session would be useful not from the academic view, but it could be used uh, in order to change our attitude towards the whole thing. So the recordings will be available to all the participants on Edu Excellence platform, and I think would also be there on NIIT platform as well. And if you give us a good lot of meaningful questions, maybe we would persuade sir to once again come in and have another session just to answer them.
After a
So
couple of months, when most schools have moved ahead, I'd love to come and take a look again.
yeah, so I think we owe it to sir to actually show it to him that we have learned something and have changed our outlook, and maybe send him some new things we have done in next 1 month or 2 months. I think we can once again assemble and we'll be doing the online version of IIT Delhi conference this time and showcase some of the examples over there. So with this, I am closing this session being very hopeful. Thank you to Rajendra sir, thank you to Harish sir, and we will see you soon with another such session. Though the bars have been set very high for us to have another equally engaging and valuable session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you, Harish.
Thank,
Thank you so much.
thank you, Himanshu, for setting it up.